The sun cast long shadows over the rugged landscape of Arizona Territory as Willa, Everhart stepped off the stagecoach, her boots landing in the dusty street of Clifton Hill with determination that matched the steel in her gray eyes. It was 1878, and the 24-year-old hadn't traveled all the way from Boston to this untamed frontier to fail at the task her late father had entrusted to her, establishing a school in this lawless mining town where education was as scarce as rain in the desert. Willa adjusted her simple navy traveling dress and grabbed her trunk, ignoring the stagecoach driver's offer of assistance. She'd learned on the journey west that showing weakness invited trouble, and there would be enough obstacles in her path without appearing incapable from the start. She surveyed the dusty main street with its ramshackle buildings, saloons, and general store. Men in dusty clothes and worn boots moved about their business, many casting curious glances her way. Miss Everhart, a thin man with spectacles, approached, his suit slightly too large for his frame. "I'm Theodore Wilson, the town clerk. We received your letter about establishing a school, though I must say we were expecting someone older." Willa straightened her spine. "Age doesn't determine capability, Mr. Wilson. I have my teaching credentials and my father's inheritance to establish the school. I trust the town council has secured the building we discussed." Wilson nodded nervously. "Yes, though it needs significant work. It's the old meeting house at the edge of town. But miss, I should warn you, some folks around here aren't exactly enthusiastic about a school. They need their children working, and education seems like a luxury to many." "Education isn't a luxury, Mr. Wilson. It's a necessity for civilization to flourish," Willa replied firmly. "Now, if you could direct me to Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. I'd like to settle in before inspecting the school building." As Wilson pointed toward a two-story clapboard structure down the street, Willa caught sight of a commotion outside the saloon. 3 men were confronting a tall figure whose back was to her. Even from behind, she could tell he carried himself differently than the others, shoulders squared, stance relaxed, but ready. His dark hat shaded his neck from the brutal sun, and a leather vest covered his white shirt, dust clinging to his denim pants. "That's trouble brewing," Wilson muttered. "Might want to steer clear, Miss Everhart. Those are the Lawson brothers. They work for the mine owner, Mr. Blackwell, and they've been looking for a fight with Everett Xavier since he stopped them from running off the Jenkins family from their claim." The name caught Willa's attention. Everett Xavier, town's unofficial peacekeeper, was a Texas Ranger before settling here. Now runs the largest cattle operation outside town. Keeps to himself mostly, except when there's trouble. Before Wilson finished his explanation, the confrontation escalated. One of the brothers lunged forward, but in a fluid motion too quick to follow, the tall man Everett sidestepped the attack and delivered a single, powerful blow that sent his attacker sprawling in the dirt. The other 2 hesitated, then backed away, helping their dazed companion to his feet. "You're making a mistake, Xavier," one spat. "Mr. Blackwell won't forget this." Everett's voice carried across the distance, low but clear. "Neither will I. Tell Blackwell if he wants those lands, he can make a fair offer like everyone else." The Lawson brothers retreated, and Everett turned toward the stagecoach, noticing Willa for the first time. His eyes, a startling shade of blue against his sun-darkened face, assessed her carefully. He tipped his hat slightly in acknowledgement before walking toward the general store. "That's the kind of man who thrives in Clifton Hill, Miss Everhart," Wilson said, his voice carrying a note of warning. "Are you certain you're prepared for life here?" Willa watched Everett Xavier's retreating figure, something stirring within her that she couldn't identify: respect, curiosity, or perhaps caution. I didn't come to Clifton Hill because I thought it would be easy, Mr. Wilson. I came because this is where I'm needed most." With that, she grabbed her trunk and headed toward the boarding house, unaware that the tall cowboy had paused at the store entrance, watching her purposeful stride with equal parts curiosity and admiration. Mrs. Peterson's boarding house was neat but simple, with sparse furnishings and clean linens. The older woman showed Willa to a small room on the second floor, her weathered face crinkling with a genuine smile. "It's not what you're used to back east, I expect," she said, "but it's clean and safe." "It's perfect, Mrs. Peterson. Thank you." Willa placed her trunk at the foot of the narrow bed. "I understand the old meeting house needs work before it can serve as a school. Is there someone in town who could help with repairs?" Mrs. Peterson chuckled, patting down her gray hair. "Most men are either working the mines or tending cattle, dear. But word travels fast in Clifton Hill. I imagine you'll have offers by supper time." Willa unpacked her few belongings and changed into a simpler dress more suited to the heat and dust. She had just finished washing her face in the basin when Mrs. Peterson called up the stairs, announcing supper in the dining room. Several boarders were already seated: a young store clerk, an elderly miner, and a middle-aged couple who introduced themselves as the town's only doctor and his wife. The conversation flowed around her, curious but respectful questions about her plans for the school. "It's a noble endeavor," Dr. Williams commented, passing a plate of biscuits. "But Clifton Hill can be harsh on noble endeavors. There's a reason we don't have a school yet." His wife nodded. "It's not just lack of resources. Some powerful people prefer an uneducated workforce, keeps wages down and complaints to a minimum." "You mean Mr. Blackwell?" Willa asked, remembering the name from earlier. A silence fell over the table. Even Mrs. Peterson looked uncomfortable. "Augustus Blackwell owns the largest silver mine in the territory," Dr. Williams finally explained. "He employs half the town directly or indirectly. He's also been buying up every piece of land he can get his hands on. And he doesn't think education is necessary," Willa pressed. "He thinks obedience is necessary," the doctor replied quietly. "Education tends to make people question things Blackwell would rather they accept." The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Willa's mind was working. She hadn't anticipated organized opposition to the school. Her father's letters had mentioned difficulties: lack of resources, the transient nature of frontier populations, but not deliberate obstruction. After dinner, despite Mrs. Peterson's warnings about walking alone after dark, Willa decided to at least view the exterior of the meeting house. The night air was cool after the heat of the day, stars blazing overhead in a way she'd never seen in Boston. Clifton Hill was relatively quiet, though light and raucous laughter spilled from the saloon. She found the old meeting house easily enough: a simple rectangular building with boarded windows and a sagging porch. Even in the dim light, she could see it needed significant work. The roof appeared sound, but the steps were rotting, and who knew what condition the interior was in. "It's not as bad as it looks." Willa startled at the deep voice, turning to find Everett Xavier approaching, his tall frame silhouetted against the night sky. Up close, she could see his face more clearly: strong jaw covered with a few days' stubble, those piercing blue eyes, and a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "Mr. Xavier," she acknowledged, trying to maintain her composure. "You startled me. Apologies, Miss Everhart." "Wilhelmina Everhart. Miss Everhart." He nodded, keeping a respectful distance. "It's not wise to wander around after dark, especially alone, so I've been told. Yet here you are, also wandering alone." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "The difference being I'm armed and familiar with the trouble in these parts." Willa gestured to the building. You said it's not as bad as it looks. The foundation is solid, roof's good, interior needs work but nothing that can't be fixed. He studied her curiously. You're the school teacher Wilson mentioned was coming. I am. Though I'm beginning to understand why the previous attempts to establish a school failed. Everett's expression darkened. Blackwell, among other challenges. She turned fully toward him, noting how he kept his right hand close to the pistol at his hip, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Mr. Wilson mentioned you were once a Texas Ranger. That was another life. His tone made it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. Well, Mr. Xavier, I appreciate your concern, but I should return to the boarding house. I'll walk you back. It wasn't a request. They walked in silence for several moments before Willa spoke again. Have you lived in Clifton Hill long? 5 years. Built my ranch about 10 miles southwest of here. He seemed to choose his next words carefully. This town has potential, Miss Everhart. Good people who want better for their children. But there are powerful interests who prefer things stay exactly as they are. And where do you stand, Mr. Xavier? He looked down at her, his expression unreadable in the darkness. I believe a community without education has no future. They reached the boarding house and Willa paused at the steps. Thank you for the escort, Mr. Xavier. Everett, he corrected. Everyone calls me Everett. Then thank you, Everett, she hesitated. I'll be beginning repairs on the meeting house tomorrow if you know anyone willing to help. I'll be there at 8, he said simply. Good night, Miss Everhart. Willa, she offered in return, surprising herself. He tipped his hat. Willa. The name sounded different in his low drawl. Sleep well. She watched him walk away, his stride long and confident. Only when he disappeared into the shadows did she enter the boarding house, her mind filled with more questions than when she'd left. True to his word, Everett arrived at the meeting house precisely at 8 the next morning, leading a wagon with lumber and tools. He wasn't alone. A young Mexican man and an older black man accompanied him, both nodding respectfully to Willa as they began unloading supplies. This is Miguel Ramirez, Everett introduced, best carpenter in the territory, and Solomon Washington, who can fix anything with a roof or foundation. Miss Everhart, Solomon said with a warm smile. Heard you're bringing education to our young ones. My granddaughter's 7. Been teaching her letters myself, but a proper school. He shook his head, emotion evident in his eyes. That's something special. The honor is mine, Mr. Washington, Willa replied, genuinely touched. Miguel, who couldn't have been much older than Willa herself, grinned. My little sisters, too, they will come, if you teach them. All children are welcome in my school, Willa affirmed, noting the flash of approval in Everett's eyes. The men set to work immediately, assessing the building's needs. Willa rolled up her sleeves and joined them, ignoring their initial protests. I may not know carpentry, she told them firmly, but I know how to follow instructions and I'm not afraid of hard work. By midday, they had cleared the debris from inside the building and removed the rotted floorboards that needed replacing. Willa had brought a basket of food from Mrs. Peterson, and they sat in the shade of a nearby cottonwood tree to eat. The building should be ready within a week if we work steady, Solomon calculated, but you'll need desks, books. I've brought some books, Willa explained. And I've written to the territorial governor for additional supplies. As for desks, even benches would suffice to start. I can build simple desks, Miguel offered. My father was a furniture maker in Sonora before. He trailed off, his expression clouding. Everett nodded. Miguel's craftsmanship is exceptional. Their meal was interrupted by the arrival of 3 riders. Willa recognized the Lawson brothers from the previous day, now accompanied by a well-dressed man with a carefully trimmed beard and cold eyes. Everett rose slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of Willa. "Blackwell, Xavier." The man dismounted with practiced grace, dusting off his expensive suit. "I heard our new school teacher had arrived, and I wanted to personally welcome her to Clifton Hill." He extended his hand toward Willa. "Augustus Blackwell, Miss Everhart, your reputation precedes you." Willa shook his hand briefly. "I wasn't aware I had a reputation, Mr. Blackwell." "The daughter of Judge Everhart, of course you do. Your father was well respected even here in the territories." "You knew my father." Willa couldn't hide her surprise. "By reputation only." "A man of principle," they said. Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you're planning to open a school." "That's correct. We hope to begin lessons within 2 weeks." Blackwell surveyed the building and the lumber stacked nearby. "Ambitious. But I wonder if you've considered the practical aspects. Many families here need their children's labor. The mines employ boys as young as 12. Which is precisely why education is essential," Willa countered. "Children deserve better options." "Options are luxuries, Miss Everhart. Survival is the priority." Blackwell's tone remained pleasant, but his meaning was clear. "I'd hate to see you invest time and resources into a venture doomed to fail for lack of students." Everett stepped forward. "People want this school, Blackwell. You don't speak for everyone in Clifton Hill." "Perhaps not." Blackwell's gaze shifted to the 2 men working alongside Everett. "Interesting choice of laborers, Xavier. Mr. Washington, I believe your grandson works in my mine. And Ramirez, your uncle's small ranch borders my new acquisition, doesn't it?" The threat was thinly veiled. Solomon's face remained impassive, but Miguel's hands clenched into fists. "Is there something specific you wanted, Blackwell?" Everett asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Merely to offer my assistance to Miss Everhart." Blackwell turned his attention back to Willa. "The territorial governor is a personal friend. If you need anything for your school, I'd be happy to write to him on your behalf." "Thank you, but I've already contacted the governor's office," Willa replied coolly. "As you wish." Blackwell mounted his horse with the same practiced ease. "Welcome to Clifton Hill, Miss Everhart. I look forward to seeing how your experiment progresses." The 3 men rode away, leaving an uneasy silence in their wake. "I should get back to work," Solomon said finally, heading toward the meeting house. Miguel followed, muttering something in Spanish that made Everett's mouth twitch with suppressed amusement. "What did he say?" Willa asked. "Trust me, you don't want to know." Everett's expression grew serious. "Blackwell doesn't make social calls, Willa. He came to assess whether you could be intimidated or bought. And his conclusion, I'd say he's still deciding." Everett studied her face. "Blackwell doesn't respond well to opposition. Your school represents a threat to his control over this town." "It's just a school," Willa protested. "It's hope," Everett corrected. "Hope that things can be different. That's dangerous to men like Blackwell." The next few days fell into a pattern. Willa would arrive at the meeting house early, often finding Everett already there, working quietly. Solomon and Miguel would join them, and occasionally other townspeople would stop by, some offering help, others simply curious. Word spread about the school, and several parents approached Willa to ask about enrolling their children. On the 4th day, as they broke for lunch, a young woman approached with a small boy in tow. She was plainly dressed but carried herself with dignity, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple bun. "Miss Everhart, I'm Sarah Jenkins. This is my son, Timothy." The boy, about 6 years old, partially hid behind his mother's skirts. "I heard you're starting a school." "Yes, Mrs. Jenkins. We hope to open in about 10 days. Sarah hesitated. "My husband worked a small silver claim outside town. He died in a cave-in last year. Mr. Xavier helped us keep our land when Mr. Blackwell tried to claim it. saying James had sold it to him before he died. She glanced gratefully at Everett, who was splitting logs nearby. Timothy needs schooling, but I can't pay much. Payment isn't my primary concern, Willa assured her. Every child deserves an education. Timothy peered at her with curious eyes. Will you teach me to read like in the books? Willa knelt to his level. I will. Would you like that? He nodded enthusiastically. Then I'll expect to see you when we open. She smiled at Sarah. Both of you are welcome to help with preparations if you'd like. Sarah's relief was palpable. Thank you. I was a teacher's assistant back in Pennsylvania before we came west. I'd be happy to help however I can. By the end of the week, the meeting house had been transformed. The rotting boards were replaced, windows unboarded and reglazed, and the interior swept clean. Miguel had begun constructing simple benches and desks, while Sarah helped Willa organize her books and plan lessons. As sunset approached on Friday, Willa stood in the doorway of the schoolhouse, surveying their work with satisfaction. Everett approached, wiping his hands on a rag. It's coming along well, he commented. Better than I hoped, she admitted. I couldn't have done it without your help. He shrugged off the gratitude. The town needed this. I just provided some labor. And protection, Willa added perceptively. The Lawson brothers haven't returned, nor has Mr. Blackwell. I suspect that's largely due to your presence. Everett leaned against the doorframe. Blackwell's not done. He's calculating his next move. He hesitated, then continued. There's a town council meeting tomorrow night. They'll be discussing whether to officially sanction your school. I thought that was already decided when they responded to my letter. The clerk and mayor were supportive, but they don't control the full council. Blackwell has 2 members in his pocket, Henderson and Mills. Mayor Taylor and Wilson support progress. The 5th member, Thompson, usually goes with the majority. Willa absorbed this information. So the meeting tomorrow will decide whether I have official approval. It's mostly symbolic. You have the building, and no one can legally stop you from teaching. But council support means access to any territorial funds that become available, and official recognition might encourage more families to enroll their children. Will you be at the meeting? She asked. I don't usually involve myself in town politics, he replied, his expression guarded. But you're involved in this, she gestured to the schoolhouse. Why, you've never explained why you're helping me. Everett was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, I had a sister, Caroline. She wanted to be a teacher, had a gift for it. We came west together after our parents died. While I was away on a ranger assignment, there was an outbreak of scarlet fever in the town where she was teaching. She didn't survive. I'm sorry, Willa said softly. She believed education could change lives, whole communities, even. When I heard about your plans for Clifton Hill, it seemed like a way to honor her memory. He straightened, uncomfortable with the personal disclosure. The meeting's at 7 in the town hall. You should be there. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and walked away, his long strides carrying him quickly down the street. The town hall was crowded the next evening. Word had spread about the meeting's agenda, and it seemed most of Clifton Hill had turned out to witness the proceedings. Willa sat in the front row, her back straight and her expression composed, though her heart raced. Mayor Taylor, a portly man with an impressive mustache, called the meeting to order. After dispatching several routine matters, he finally addressed the main issue. Next on our agenda is the matter of Miss Everhart's proposed school. He nodded respectfully toward Willa. As you all know, Miss Everhart arrived from Boston last week with the intention of establishing Clifton Hill's first proper school. The building is nearly ready, thanks to volunteer efforts from our community. Councilman Henderson, A thin man with a perpetually sour expression spoke up. While education is certainly valuable, we must consider the practical aspects. Many families here depend on their children's labor. A mandatory school would create hardship. No one has suggested attendance would be mandatory, Mayor Taylor pointed out. Not yet, Henderson replied ominously. But these things have a way of progressing. First a school, then compulsory attendance laws. Councilman Mills nodded vigorously. And there's the matter of funding. Miss Everhart may have resources now, but what happens when those are exhausted? Will the town be expected to support this venture? The debate continued, with Wilson defending the school's importance while Henderson and Mills raised ever more hypothetical objections. Thompson, the swing vote, remained silent, his expression thoughtful. From her seat, Willa could see Blackwell seated near the back, watching the proceedings with an air of detached amusement. The Lawson brothers flanked him like loyal dogs. Just as Mayor Taylor was preparing to call for a vote, the door opened, and Everett Xavier entered. A murmur went through the crowd as he made his way to the front, his presence commanding attention without effort. "Mr. Xavier," Mayor Taylor acknowledged, surprised. "Did you wish to address the council?" Everett nodded, removing his hat. "I did." He turned to face the assembled townspeople rather than the council. "Most of you know I don't involve myself in town matters unless necessary. I believe this qualifies." He surveyed the room, his gaze lingering briefly on Blackwell before continuing. "Clifton Hill stands at a crossroads. We can remain what we are, a mining town with a limited future, or we can build something that lasts beyond the silver in those hills." "Poetic, Xavier," Henderson interrupted sarcastically, "but hardly practical." "Practical," Everett's voice hardened. "Let me speak of practical matters. When the silver runs out, and it will, what happens to Clifton Hill? What happens to your businesses, your homes, your futures? Without education, without skills beyond mining and ranching, this town dies." He gestured toward Willa. "Miss Everhart offers our children opportunities many of us never had. She asks for nothing in return except our support. I've pledged 20 head of cattle from my herd to be sold, with proceeds going to the school's continued operation." This announcement caused another ripple of surprise. 20 head of cattle represented a significant donation. "Furthermore," Everett continued, "I propose that those who benefit directly from Clifton Hill's prosperity, mine owners included, contribute a small percentage of their profits to ensure the school's future." Blackwell rose from his seat, his face flushed with anger. "You have no right to suggest how I should spend my money, Xavier. I have every right as a citizen of this territory to advocate for its future," Everett replied calmly. "Education benefits everyone, Blackwell, even you. Educated workers are more productive, more innovative. Unless, of course, your concern is that educated people might be harder to exploit." The room fell silent at this direct challenge. Blackwell's eyes narrowed dangerously, but before he could respond, Thompson cleared his throat. "I've heard enough," the councilman said. "Mr. Xavier makes a compelling point about our town's future. I move that we officially sanction Miss Everhart's school and establish a small tax on mining and commercial operations to supplement its funding." "Second," Wilson said quickly. Mayor Taylor called for the vote. Thompson's support swung the decision in favor of the school, 3 votes to 2. Blackwell stormed out, the Lawson brothers in his wake, but not before casting a venomous glance at both Everett and Willa. The rest of the crowd broke into discussions, many approaching Willa with congratulations or questions about enrollment. When she finally made her way outside, she found Everett waiting, leaning against the hitching post. "That was quite a speech," she said, pulling her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "I meant every word." His eyes reflected the light from the town hall's windows. "Blackwell won't take this lightly, I know, but it was worth it." She studied his face in the dim light. 20 head of cattle is a generous donation, Everett. The school needs security. One-time donations won't provide that. They walked in companionable silence toward the boarding house. As they approached, Everett spoke again. "There's a social gathering tomorrow night at the Jenkins place. Nothing formal, some music, dancing, food. Sarah mentioned she'd invited you." "She did. I told her I would attend." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. It'll give you a chance to meet more families in a less formal setting than a town meeting." As they reached the boarding house steps, Willa turned to face him. "Will you be there?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I might make an appearance. Then I'll look forward to it." She climbed the first step, then paused. "Thank you, Everett. Not just for tonight, but for everything these past days. You're bringing something valuable to Clifton Hill, Willa, something it desperately needs." His voice dropped lower. "Something I didn't realize I needed to see happen until you arrived." With that cryptic statement, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Willa to wonder at the growing connection between them. The Jenkins homestead was modest but welcoming, with lanterns strung between posts and a cleared area for dancing. A fiddler and a man with a guitar provided music, while tables laden with food lined one side of the yard. Children darted between adults, their laughter adding to the festive atmosphere. Sarah greeted Willa warmly, introducing her to neighbors and friends. The reception was mixed, some warmly enthusiastic about the school, others politely reserved, clearly waiting to see if her venture would succeed before committing their support. Timothy Jenkins proudly showed Willa the small wooden horse Everett had carved for him. "Mr. Xavier says I can come see his ranch sometime and ride a real horse," the boy explained excitedly. "That sounds wonderful," Willa replied, surprised by this glimpse of Everett's gentler side. "He's good with children," Sarah observed, following Willa's gaze. "People underestimate him because he's quiet, but there's a depth to him that few bother to discover." As the evening progressed, Willa found herself enjoying the simple pleasures of community good food, lively music, and genuine conversation. She was in the middle of explaining her teaching philosophy to a curious mother when a subtle shift in the atmosphere alerted her to Everett's arrival. He stood at the edge of the gathering, speaking quietly with Solemn in Washington. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. His usually dusty clothes were clean, his dark hair neatly combed, though still slightly too long by Eastern standards. When their eyes met across the yard, something unspoken passed between them. He nodded in acknowledgement, a gesture she returned with a smile later as the fiddler struck up a lively tune and couples began to dance. Everett approached her. "May I have this dance, Miss Everhart?" he asked formally, extending his hand. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Xavier." She placed her hand in his, noting the contrast between his sun-roughened skin and her paler complexion. He led her into the dance with surprising grace for a man of his size. His hand at her waist was respectful but firm, guiding her through the steps with confidence. "You dance well for a cowboy," she teased gently. "My mother insisted on lessons," he admitted, a rare smile lighting his features. "Said no son of hers would stomp around like a buffalo at social gatherings. A wise woman, she was." His expression grew more serious. "You've made quite an impression on Clifton Hill in just a week, Willa. For better or worse. Mostly better, I'd say. Though Blackwell might disagree." As they continued dancing, Willa became increasingly aware of Everett's physical presence, the subtle pine scent of his soap, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled, the steadiness of his hand at her waist. When the music ended, he didn't immediately release her. Would you like to step outside for some air? It's getting crowded in here." She nodded, and he led her to a quiet spot near a gnarled old oak tree where the sounds of the gathering were muted but still audible. The night was clear, stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds on velvet. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "So different from Boston." "What made you choose Clifton Hill?" he asked. "There must have been easier places to establish a school." "My father spent time in Arizona Territory as a young man before he became a judge. He always spoke of it with such affection." She gazed up at the stars. "When he died last year, I found journals from his time here. He wrote about communities struggling without education, about the potential he saw in this territory. It seemed fitting to honor his memory by continuing what he believed in." "You gave up a lot to come here." "Did I?" she considered. "I had a comfortable life in Boston, but not a purposeful one. Teaching society girls proper penmanship and French phrases seemed increasingly meaningless after my father's death." Everett was quiet for a moment, then said, "Purpose matters. It's what separates existing from living." The simple insight resonated deeply with Willa. "Yes, exactly. And you? What brings purpose to your life, Everett?" He contemplated the question. "For a long time, it was just survival. After Caroline died, I drifted. The Rangers gave me structure, a code to live by, but eventually that wasn't enough." He gestured toward the distant hills. "The ranch gave me roots again. Building something, tending the land, watching things grow, there's meaning in that." "And now the school," she added. "And now the school," he agreed, his voice warming. "Watching you stand up to Blackwell, seeing how you've inspired people like Sarah and Solomon, it reminds me there are things worth fighting for beyond just land and cattle." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Everett tensed immediately, his hand moving to his pistol as 3 riders came into view. "Lawson brothers," he murmured, recognizing them in the moonlight. "Stay behind me, Willa." The men dismounted, their movements unsteady. They'd clearly been drinking heavily. "Well, look what we found," the eldest Lawson slurred. "The schoolmarm and her pet gunslinger." "You're not welcome here," Everett stated flatly. "Ride on." "Free country, ain't it?" another brother challenged. "Maybe we came for some dancing and socializing." "You came looking for trouble," Everett countered. "And you found me instead. Last chance ride away now." The third brother, the youngest but largest, stepped forward aggressively. "Blackwell says you're getting above yourself, Xavier. Says that school's going to cause nothing but problems." "Then Blackwell should come say so himself, not send his drunken errand boys." This insult was too much for the brothers. The youngest lunged at Everett, who sidestepped the attack and delivered a powerful blow to the man's midsection, doubling him over. The other 2 rushed forward together. Despite the odds, Everett moved with practiced efficiency, his movements economical and precise. He blocked a wild swing from the eldest brother, countering with a strike that sent the man sprawling. The middle brother managed to land a glancing blow before Everett's fist connected with his jaw, dropping him beside his sibling. The commotion drew attention from the gathering. Several men rushed over, including Solomon and Miguel, who positioned themselves protectively near Willa. "Get these fools out of here," Everett directed, his breathing only slightly elevated despite the exertion. And someone informed the sheriff they were threatening the social. As the Lawson brothers were escorted away, Everett turned to Willa, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she assured him, though her heart was racing. "What about you?" He flexed his hand. "Nothing serious." Despite her protests that the evening needn't end on this sour note, Everett insisted on escorting Willa back to town. They rode on his horse, Willa seated before him, his arms around her to hold the reins. The closeness was both improper and thrilling, his solid presence at her back a reminder of his protective nature. "Blackwell's escalating," Everett observed as they rode. The Lawsons wouldn't have dared something so public without his explicit approval. What does he hope to accomplish? Frighten me into leaving, possibly, or provoke me into doing something that would discredit us both. They reached the boarding house too quickly for Willa's liking. Everett dismounted first, then reached up to help her down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "I'll speak with the sheriff tomorrow," he said. "He's not in Blackwell's pocket, but he's hesitant to challenge him openly. This can't continue, Everett." Confrontation isn't the answer for either side. He nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps it's time I had a direct conversation with Blackwell, clear the air. That could be dangerous. So is letting this situation fester." He studied her face in the moonlight. "The school opens in 3 days. Between now and then, I'll try to ensure Blackwell understands that opposing you means opposing the entire community." "Not just me?" she asked, hearing something personal in his tone. "Not just the school," he clarified, his voice dropping lower. "You, Willa. I find myself increasingly concerned with your safety and happiness." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken implications. "I should go in," she said finally, reluctant to end the moment but mindful of propriety. "Of course." He stepped back, creating proper distance between them. "Good night, Willa." "Good night, Everett. Thank you for the escort." She watched him ride away, her thoughts in turmoil. In just over a week, this man had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. His strength, his principles, his unexpected gentleness all combined to create an attraction she could no longer deny, even to herself. The next morning brought unexpected news. Sheriff Patterson arrived at the boarding house during breakfast, asking to speak with Willa privately. "Miss Everhart," he began once they were seated in the small parlor, "there's been an incident at the schoolhouse overnight." Alarm coursed through her. "What kind of incident?" "Vandalism." The sheriff's weathered face was grim. "Someone broke windows, damaged the new desks, scattered your books." "I've got men there now, assessing the damage." "The Lawson brothers," Willa concluded immediately. "Most likely, though there's no direct evidence. They were thrown out of the saloon around midnight for fighting, plenty drunk and angry." He cleared his throat uncomfortably. There was also a message painted on the wall. "Go back east," not very original, but the meaning's clear enough. Willa stood, her hands trembling slightly with anger rather than fear. "I need to see the damage. Miss Everhart, perhaps you should wait until—" "I need to see it, Sheriff. Now." When they arrived at the schoolhouse, Willa was struck by the senseless destruction. Windows shattered, books torn and scattered, desks overturned and hacked with what must have been an axe. And there on the far wall in crude red letters, the message the sheriff had described. Miguel and Solomon were already there, silently salvaging what they could. Miguel's face was thunderous as he carefully collected pieces of the desks he had crafted. "I can repair them," he told Willa, determination in every line of his body. "It will take time, but they can be fixed." "And we'll replace the windows," Solomon added. "This changes nothing, Miss Everhart. The school will open." Willa was touched by their resolve. "Thank you both." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Everhart, I understand your determination, but this is clearly a warning. Perhaps delaying the opening would be wise, just until tensions cool." "Delaying would be surrendering," she replied firmly. "We open as planned." "Have you seen Everett this morning?" Solomon asked the sheriff. "No, and that's probably for the best. Xavier's got a temper when pushed, and this would certainly qualify." As if summoned by his name, Everett appeared in the doorway, his expression darkening as he surveyed the damage. His eyes found Willa's immediately, checking that she was unharmed before assessing the destruction. "Lawson Brothers?" he asked the sheriff, his voice deceptively calm. "Probably, but no proof." Everett nodded once, then turned to Willa. "We'll have this cleaned up by nightfall. The school opens as scheduled." "I've already told the sheriff the same," she agreed. Everett's eyes softened momentarily. "I never doubted it." Then, to the others, "Miguel, make a list of materials we need. Solomon, round up any men willing to help. Sheriff, I suggest you pay a visit to the Lawson brothers while they're still sleeping off last night's whiskey." As the men dispersed to their tasks, Everett approached Willa. "This doesn't change my plan to speak with Blackwell. If anything, it makes it more urgent." "Be careful," she urged. "He's clearly willing to escalate this conflict." "So am I." His jaw was set, determination evident in every line of his face. "But my methods will be different. I'll see you this afternoon." Word of the vandalism spread quickly through Clifton Hill. By midday, a steady stream of townspeople arrived at the schoolhouse, some to help with repairs, others to express support or outrage at the destruction. Even those who had been ambivalent about the school seemed offended by the attack on community property. Sarah Jenkins organized a group of women to clean and salvage damaged books. Mayor Taylor arrived with glass for the windows, donated by the general store. By sunset, the physical damage had been largely repaired, though the red message still showed faintly through the whitewash hastily applied over it. Everett had been conspicuously absent throughout the day. As Willa thanked the last volunteers and prepared to return to the boarding house, she found herself watching the road, hoping for his return. She was nearly back to Mrs. Peterson's when she spotted him riding toward town, his expression unreadable in the fading light. He dismounted when he saw her, leading his horse the remaining distance. "How did it go?" she asked without preamble. Blackwell was receptive. Something in his tone made her suspicious. "Receptive how?" Everett sighed. "I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. I've agreed to sell him the southeast section of my ranch land he's wanted for water access. In exchange, he'll publicly support the school and ensure the Lawson brothers cause no further trouble." Willa was stunned. "You sold part of your ranch for the school?" "For peace in Clifton Hill," he corrected, though his eyes told a different story. "The land matters less to me than I thought. Everett, I can't let you make that sacrifice. It's already done." He offered a small smile. "Besides, it's good business. I extracted a fair price, and Blackwell values the deal enough to keep his word. He's a businessman first, vindictive second." Willa was speechless, overwhelmed by what this man had done for her, for the school and community, but also, she suspected, for her personally. "Walk with me," he suggested, gesturing toward the small church garden where they might speak privately. In the quiet garden, with only the first stars as witnesses, Everett finally spoke what had been building between them. "I didn't expect you, Willa Everhart," he said softly. "When you stepped off that stagecoach, I saw another Eastern idealist who'd break against the realities of frontier life. I was wrong." "And what do you see now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I see a woman of extraordinary courage and conviction. Someone who fights for what matters without compromise." He took a step closer. "I see someone who's awakened parts of me I thought long dead." "Everett, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I'm not a man of many words, but you deserve to hear these. I'm falling in love with you, Willa. It's happened so quickly it should frighten me, but instead it feels like the most natural thing in the world, like something I've been waiting for without knowing it." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable from a man who rarely revealed his inner thoughts. "I know it's soon," he continued when she remained silent. "I know you came here for the school. Not for Willa closed the distance between them, pressing her fingers gently against his lips to stop his words. I came here for purpose, Everett. I found it in the school, yes, but also in you. She lowered her hand, her eyes holding his. I'm falling in love with you too. The admission seemed to release something in him. With exquisite gentleness, he cupped her face in his hands and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, tentative at first, then deepening as she responded, her hands coming to rest against his chest. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Everett rested his forehead against hers. This territory is still wild in many ways, Willa. Building a life here won't be easy. The worthwhile things rarely are, she replied, her heart full. But we'll build it together, the school, the community, whatever comes next. Whatever comes next, he echoed, sealing the promise with another kiss. The school opened as scheduled 3 days later. 27 students of varying ages filed into the restored building, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Willa stood at the front of the room, watching as they found seats at the repaired desks. Blackwell had kept his word, publicly endorsing the school at Sunday's church service. The Lawson brothers had been conspicuously subdued, even nodding respectfully when they passed Willa on the street. Whatever Everett had said to Blackwell had apparently been effective. As Willa prepared to begin the first lesson, she noticed Everett standing in the doorway, watching with quiet pride. Their eyes met briefly, a private moment of understanding passing between them before he tipped his hat and departed, leaving her to her calling while he returned to his. Over the following weeks, the school flourished. Word spread to outlying farms and ranches, bringing more students. Willa implemented an evening program for adults wishing to improve their reading and arithmetic, which proved surprisingly popular among the miners and ranch hands. Her relationship with Everett deepened as autumn progressed. They spent evenings planning both for the school's future and, increasingly, their own. His quiet strength complemented her determined spirit, while her vision inspired his protective nature. In late October, as golden leaves drifted from the cottonwoods and the first cool winds promised winter, Everett took Willa to his ranch for the first time. The main house was larger than she'd expected, built of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Gardens, now mostly harvested for the season, stretched behind the house, and beyond them pastures rolled toward distant hills. "It's beautiful," she said as he helped her down from the buggy. "It's home," he replied simply. "Or it could be." The implication was clear in his eyes as he led her inside, showing her through rooms filled with sturdy, well-crafted furniture. The house was masculine but not unwelcoming. Large windows brought in ample light, and the kitchen was surprisingly well-equipped. "Caroline helped design it," he explained as they settled on the porch with coffee. "She always said a home should be practical without sacrificing beauty." She was right. Willa looked out over the land, seeing not just what was but what could be. "You've built something remarkable here, Everett." "Not finished building," he said, setting aside his coffee cup and taking her hands in his. "Willa, I know this is faster than might be proper back east, but life moves differently here. The past months have shown me what I want for my future, and that future includes you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Inside nestled a ring with a modest diamond flanked by 2 small sapphires. "The sapphires reminded me of your eyes," he said softly. "Willa Everhart, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of building a life here, continuing your work with the school while making this house a home." Tears pricked at her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Everett, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the promises words couldn't express. They were married in Clifton Hill's small church 3 weeks later, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Even Blackwell made an appearance, his gift of a substantial donation to the school fund a testament to the new equilibrium in town. Sarah Jenkins served as Willa's matron of honor, while Solomon stood as Everett's best man. Timothy Jenkins proudly carried the rings, his chest puffed out with importance. As they exchanged vows, Willa reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Arizona Territory to tame a wild frontier with education and civilization, never expecting that a quiet, principled cowboy would tame her heart in return. The irony wasn't lost on her, nor was the perfection of their partnership, each bringing different strengths, each making the other more complete. The wedding celebration continued well into the night, with dancing and feasting under stars that seemed to shine especially bright. As Everett led his bride in a dance, he whispered in her ear, "Happy, Mrs. Xavier?" "Completely," she replied, savoring the new name. "Though I may still be Miss Everhart at school." "As long as you're Mrs. Xavier at home," he conceded with a smile. Their honeymoon was a week at a hot springs resort near Tucson, a rare luxury in the territory. Upon their return, they settled into life at the ranch, with Willa riding into town each day to teach while Everett managed his cattle operation. Winter passed in a blur of contentment. The school continued to grow, with Willa training Sarah to assist with the younger children. Everett expanded his business connections, securing contracts that would ensure the ranch's prosperity regardless of Blackwell's influence in the region. Spring brought new beginnings in more ways than one. As wildflowers carpeted the hills surrounding the ranch, Willa shared the news she'd suspected for several weeks. They would welcome a child by late autumn. Everett's reaction was everything she could have hoped: joy, wonder, and a renewed protectiveness that manifested in a flurry of preparations. A nursery was added to the house, furniture crafted by Miguel's skilled hands. Everett insisted on hiring help for the ranch to ensure Willa wouldn't overtax herself with both teaching and household duties. "The school needs you," he said, when she protested that she could manage both. "And our child will need you. Let me provide the support you need to do both well." As her pregnancy progressed, Willa found herself increasingly grateful for his foresight. The growing school demanded more of her energy, and by late summer, she was thankful for the ranch hand's wife who now managed most household tasks. August brought a letter that would further shape their future. The territorial governor, impressed by reports of the Clifton Hill school's success, offered Willa a position on a newly formed education council. The role would involve helping establish standards and secure funding for schools throughout Arizona Territory. "It's an incredible opportunity," Everett said when she showed him the letter. "You could influence education beyond just Clifton Hill." "But the school, Sarah is nearly ready to take over as head teacher. You've prepared her well, and she has a natural gift." He took her hands, his expression earnest. "This is a chance to expand what you've started, to help other communities establish what we have here." After careful consideration and discussions with Sarah, Willa accepted the position. The timing worked well. She would begin her new duties after the baby was born, and she'd had time to recover. On a crisp November morning, as the first snow dusted the distant mountains, William Everett Xavier entered the world after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined expression, a combination that made both parents laugh through happy tears. "He'll be strong-willed," Everett predicted, cradling his son with a tenderness that contrasted with his rugged exterior. "Like his father," Willa teased, exhausted but radiant. "And his mother," Everett countered, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you for this gift, Willa, for everything you've brought into my life." As winter settled over the ranch, the Xavier family established new rhythms. William thrived, growing stronger each day. Willa recovered her strength and began corresponding with her education council colleagues, preparing for her new role. Everett expanded the ranch's operations, hiring more hands and purchasing additional cattle. With Blackwell's influence in the region waning, rumors suggested he was considering selling his mining interests, and returning East Everett was positioned to become one of the territory's most successful ranchers. By the following spring, when William was nearly 6 months old, Willa made her first trip to Phoenix for an education council meeting. The separation from her son and husband was difficult, but Everett's support never wavered. "What you're doing matters," he reminded her the night before her departure. "Just as you believed in me, I believe in you." Upon her return a week later, she found Everett and William waiting at the stagecoach stop, the baby squealing with delight at the sight of his mother. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, William asleep in his father's arms, Everett shared news of his own. "I've been offered a position too," he said. "The territorial governor wants me to serve as a special marshal, helping establish law in the more remote settlements." Willa turned to him, surprised. "Like going back to your ranger days. Similar, but different too. Less about hunting outlaws, more about helping communities establish proper legal frameworks." He looked down at their sleeping son. "I'd be gone occasionally, but never for long periods. And it would complement your work, education and law, both foundations for civilization. You'd be good at it," she said thoughtfully. "You understand both the letter of the law and the spirit of justice. I told the governor I needed to discuss it with my wife." His eyes met hers. "Our partnership comes first, Willa. If you think it would strain our family too much, I think," she interrupted gently, "that we came to this territory to make a difference. We're doing that, each in our own way. Together, we can do even more." Everett's smile was worth every hardship she'd faced since arriving in Arizona. "Together," he agreed. 5 years later, the Xavier Ranch had become a center of community life in Clifton Hill. The main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. William had been joined by a sister, Caroline Sarah, and the household often included visitors connected to either Willa's education work or Everett's legal duties. The school in town, now run by Sarah Jenkins, who had married Miguel Ramirez the previous year, served as a model for other communities. Willa's work on the Education Council had helped establish schools throughout the territory, with standardized materials and training for teachers. Everett's role as special marshal had evolved into a position advising the territorial government on legal matters affecting rural communities. His fair-minded approach and intimate knowledge of frontier challenges made him particularly effective in resolving disputes that might otherwise have escalated into violence. On the 10th anniversary of Willa's arrival in Clifton Hill, the town held a celebration honoring both the school's success and the broader changes the Xavier family had helped bring about. The once rough mining settlement had transformed into a thriving community with a diverse economy, proper governance, and educational opportunities for all its citizens. As Willa stood beside Everett at the celebration, watching 8-year-old William chase his 3-year-old sister around the town square, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "Did you ever imagine this when you saw me step off that stagecoach?" she asked, leaning into his embrace. Everett chuckled, the sound reverberating through his chest against her ear. "I thought you'd last a month before fleeing back east. I'd never been so happy to be wrong." Mayor Taylor approached, interrupting their private moment to present them with a plaque commemorating the school's decade of service. As he spoke of Willa's courage and vision, she squeezed Everett's hand, acknowledging silently that none of it would have been possible without him. Later that evening, as they prepared for bed in their ranch house, Everett pulled her into his arms, his expression suddenly serious. "I've been offered a position on the Territorial Supreme Court," he said without preamble. "It would mean moving to Phoenix." Willa absorbed this news, considering its implications. "Your legal work has been leading in this direction," she acknowledged. "You'd make an excellent judge, Everett. It would mean uprooting our family, changing the children's lives. Your work is here too." She shook her head, smiling. "My work is wherever education needs an advocate. The Education Council is based in Phoenix as well. William is old enough for a more advanced school, and Caroline will adapt quickly." She searched his face. "Is this what you want?" "I want to serve justice as my father did before drink took him," Everett admitted. "I want to ensure the law protects those who need protection most. And yes, I believe I could do that effectively from the bench." "Then we'll go to Phoenix," she said simply. "We'll build a new chapter there just as we built one here." Relief and love washed over his features. "I don't deserve you, Willa Xavier." "Perhaps not," she teased, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "But you're stuck with me regardless." They moved to Phoenix the following year, establishing a new home in the territorial capital while maintaining the ranch as a retreat and legacy for their children. Everett's judicial career flourished, his reputation for fairness and insight earning him respect throughout the territory. Willa's education initiatives expanded, eventually helping Arizona establish one of the most progressive public education systems in the Western Territories. 20 years after their first meeting, as they celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary, Everett and Willa sat on the porch of their Phoenix home, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in breathtaking colors. "I had a letter from William today," Willa shared, referring to their son who was now studying law at Harvard. "He's considering returning to Arizona to practice after graduation. Says the territory still needs good lawyers who understand both Eastern law and Western realities." "Like father, like son," Everett mused, his hair now silver at the temples but his eyes as piercingly blue as ever. "And Caroline, still determined to become a doctor. The medical college in San Francisco has accepted her application." Pride filled Willa's voice. "She'll be one of only 3 women in her class." Everett nodded, equally proud. "They've both inherited your determination." "And your sense of justice," she countered, reaching for his hand. "We've given them strong foundations, Everett. They'll build remarkable lives." "As we have," he said softly, bringing her hand to his lips. "When I think about that stubborn schoolteacher who arrived in Clifton Hill, determined to tame the wild territory, and instead found a wild cowboy who tamed her heart," Willa finished, her eyes twinkling. "I wouldn't say tamed," he protested with a grin. "Perhaps partnered with is more accurate." She laughed, the sound as musical to his ears as it had been 2 decades earlier. "A fair correction, Your Honor." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, comfortable in the silence that only comes with years of deep connection. The wild territory had indeed been tamed not by force or individual will, but through partnership, vision, and the transformative power of love. Everett Xavier and Willa Everhart Xavier had built something lasting in Arizona territory, a legacy of justice, education, and community that would endure long after them. But perhaps their greatest achievement was the life they'd built together, a testament to the unexpected ways the frontier could shape and be shaped by those brave enough to envision a different future. As the first stars appeared overhead, Everett drew his wife closer. "I love you, Willa Xavier. Today and always." "And I love you," she replied, resting her head against his shoulder. "My cowboy, my partner, my heart." Together, they watched night claim the desert, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they hadn't known. They were seeking a love as enduring as the land itself, and a legacy that would help shape a territory into a state, and eventually a part of American history.